Hey guys, this is Miss Drake coming at you again live pre-recorded from our back porch. The kids are asleep, so it's quiet enough to make another video. So this is our second video for the week. And notice that there may be a few bugs flying around. Believe it or not, our power's out too. So I'm having to operate by cell phone and candlelight. So that tends to draw some bugs around. But you know what? We're going to get through it anyway. I just hope the bugs don't bite or land in my face. But anyway, what I want to do with this video is to actually take a moment to review political parties. So if you'll go ahead and pull up your civics review for political parties, I want to go over some of the questions together. So you can pause or fast forward as you need. If you already have the questions answered, you can kind of skip through. Or if you need to pause and write down some stuff. I also want to remind you that if you're experiencing some difficulties with the online platform, please let us know. Of course, if you have any ideas and suggestions, I'd love to hear those as well. Maybe we can apply some different ideas and techniques to our civics platform as well. And anytime you're experiencing, again, any kind of needs, problems, or issues, get in touch with us, with one of your teachers. Let us know how we can help you, because really that's what we're here for. So if you've pulled up your civics review number 1 on political parties, keep in mind, again, that this is going to be able to help you with your political parties test grade. So this particular assignment will be graded based on not only completion but also accuracy. So you have to get the answers correct. And also it needs to be your own work. I want to stress that with an online platform that maintaining academic integrity is incredibly important. So be aware of that. There's no way that two students can get the exact same answer on an open-ended assignment like that. So just keep that in mind. So when we're getting started now, and I'd like to scroll down just a little bit. Here we go. To questions 3 through 6, first of all, and that's going to deal with interest groups, PACs, and lobbyists, and we've discussed that before in our political parties unit right before we left for the situation. And so question number 3 is asking about lobbyists, who uses them and how they influence government. Lobbyists are professionals that are hired by interest groups, and they are going to be used to influence government by actually talking to legislators, by bringing them factual information, data and statistics, expert opinions, in order to persuade them. Of course, they can use propaganda techniques as well as they're meeting with these legislators. And of course, if you'll take a look at number 5, the question is, what's the purpose of an interest group? Well, those interest groups are organizations like the National Rifle Association that has a specific issue that they want to influence government with, and so they'll use those lobbyists and hire them in order to send them to Congress on their behalf. So remember, we watched a little video, I think it was called Billy Wants a Dog. And so the idea was that lobbyists are hired professionals so that they know how to influence people in particular. They know how to find information. They know how to research and present that research in a certain way to be influential. Now that's a great thing for our legislators because it's going to help them in the lawmaking process to bring actual facts. But on the downside, of course, we have a criticism with that, where of course usually it's going to wind up where the organizations with the most money are going to be able to be the most influential because they're the ones that can hire the lobbyists. And of course our government shouldn't be controlled by just people with the most money. So that's a criticism. But with the Citizens United Supreme Court case, it's been ruled that how you spend your money is a form of freedom of expression. So that, businesses can do this. They can hire the people that they want or need in order to influence government. So let's take a look at the difference between a PAC and an interest group. First of all, for number 4, a PAC and an interest group can be kind of similar, like the National Rifle Association is definitely an interest group, but they can also act as a PAC. A PAC is going to try to influence the outcome of an election, and so they usually do that by spending money on campaign ads, either for or typically against their candidates. They can also make movies about a candidate. And so again, the question is, what about all of this spending money? How is that going to be influential in terms of the outcome of an election? Isn't that like buying off an election? Well, again, the Supreme Court's ruled that how you spend your money is a method of free speech, so you can do that. So we have to be very careful and aware in terms of citizens that those things are happening in terms of the media, which is what we'll get to with number 8. So to answer number 6, the main difference between a PAC and an interest group. A political action committee works to influence the outcome of an election, so they're going to spend money on campaigns. And an interest group is going to work to influence legislators once they get elected. It should say once they are elected. And so this is the main difference. But now, a PAC and an interest group can be the same organization. Again, the National Rifle Association can act both as an interest group and as a PAC. So let's take a look at number 8. So for number 8, the question is, how can the mass media influence public opinion? And we addressed this slightly. We didn't go into a large amount of detail on this because I think you guys pretty much understand that the media uses propaganda techniques in order to influence public opinion. So there is a lot of bias out there. Well, really, everybody has a bias, but not only do they have a bias, they have a specific agenda for that. It doesn't make it wrong. It doesn't make it right. It means they have a specific agenda or push for the presentation of the information and the facts that they have. We as citizens have to be aware that all of the information that we're seeing in the mass media, of course, has this influence to it. So we have to, of course, for the best sources of information, get our information from a variety of different sources and fact check ourselves. And of course, that's perfect to discuss, of course, the issues that are going on in our society today with the COVID-19 virus and actually what's happening in terms of getting our information from reliable sources. So let's keep scrolling to take a look at some of the other questions that I've highlighted that students have had trouble with. And of course, that's number 10. Number 10 is about the party system in U.S. history. And so our first party system was actually the Federalists and Democrat Republicans. Remember, the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, you'll see that on the screen, are not political parties. But of course, they did split with the creation of the new U.S. Constitution. That was the big point. Remember what the big question was, is, and always will be? Yep, how much power should the federal government have in your life? So the Federalists wanted a stronger federal government, while the Anti-Federalists were really skeptical about the power of the federal government. And they wanted to limit that power over individuals. They wanted to ensure states had some power and authority in terms of federalism. So they suggested adding the Bill of Rights to the U.S. Constitution in order to protect the individual liberty. Well, the Federalists, of course, were out for the common good. So this is where we develop after the U.S. Constitution is ratified. We have the two political parties that do develop, the Federalists and the Democrat Republicans. So what's the main difference there? Well, the Federalists are the same as above. For the Federalist faction, they wanted a stronger federal government. But they're going to die out as a result of some of the actions that happened during the War of 1812. They become very unpopular after the War of 1812. Now, the Democrat Republicans were the Anti-Federalists, and they're going to become like the Democrats in letter C. And again, just like the Anti-Federalists, they were concerned about limiting the power of the federal government and protection of individual rights for people. So looking at C with Whigs and Democrats, the Whigs are going to develop specifically to counter Andrew Jackson, who was a Democrat. Now, the Democrat Republicans, for a time, they were the National Republicans, and then they're just going to become the Democrat Party. So now we're talking about the Democrats. And so the Whigs are going to develop in order to counter Jackson's strong executive policies. Now, Jackson is still pretty much a small federal government guy. He is about individual liberties, but he is very much a very powerful executive. Now, the Whig Party is not going to last long because, of course, once Andrew Jackson is out of power, he's only going to serve 2 terms in the early 1800s. And so he's going to no longer be the reason that the Whigs are going to be upset. So at this time, of course, in the 1830s, a bigger issue is on the rise, and of course, that's slavery. Well, that's where the Republicans are going to actually develop. But before we get there, I want to mention that the Democrats themselves were the only party that really had any kind of power, and the only party that existed after the War of 1812. So really from 1812, really more like 1815, to the 1830s, there was really only one political party, and that is the Democrat Party. And you'll learn more about that in U.S. History 1. So let's take a look at letter D, the Republicans and Democrats. Now keep in mind that in the beginning, the Republicans were developed in 1854 as the party against slavery. So that's going to be the political party of Abraham Lincoln, and they are going to be against slavery, and they're in the North. The Democrats were in the South, and they were for slavery, but they still wanted, of course, limited federal government. So the Republicans were about bigger federal government, and the Democrats were about limited federal government. Now, I didn't put this in, but you know, hopefully from the screencast that we had about the history of political parties, that in the 1930s, this political party, these two political parties are going to switch platforms because FDR, Roosevelt, is going to be, even though a Democrat, he's going to rise to the occasion in order to respond to the Americans' needs in the Great Depression. And so he's going to become a big federal government person. That's just the crisis necessitated that kind of response. So even though he was a small federal government president, the crisis situation meant that he was going to be a big federal government president. And this is where the party platforms are going to switch to where the Democrats of today are going to be big federal government and the Republicans are going to be small federal government. But again, sometimes crises are going to necessitate kind of a break from that, kind of like what we're seeing with the president now, with Donald Trump's big federal government responses to the crisis of COVID-19. And so the last three questions are there on your screen, 12, 13, and 17. And so these two, a lot of students missed them on the test. I don't know why. I think we just never went back and reviewed them, and I want to reinforce them now. And the two things are voting and the social contract theory. Why is voting so important for us? Because it gives the government your consent. That's the social contract theory, the consent of the governed. The only way that the government can rule over you is if you allow them to. If you don't want them to rule over you, then you've got to change that. That goes all the way back to Thomas Jefferson. That doesn't look like a heart. It's a heart. Thomas Jefferson and the Declaration of Independence. So how is the social contract theory related to that? Well, you're going to choose a candidate who's going to be a part of government that provides these rules, the security and order, but you must follow that as a citizen. Now that might mean limiting some of your freedoms, and we kind of again see that today with the state shutdown where people are supposed to stay at home, the stay-at-home order. You may not want to do that. I don't mind staying at home, but if I'm told to stay at home, then I probably don't want to stay at home anymore, which is strange, but that's kind of the way that we often look at things. So the problem is, with the social contract theory, if you're going to live in a society, live in a government, they have to be able to rule over you, but they can only rule over you if you give them your consent. And so if you change your mind about how they're doing things, like if you don't like the way that Congress or the governor or your state legislators or even your county commissioners are governing you, then it's your job to vote for someone else. Or better yet, when you're old enough and you can meet the requirements, run for office yourself. So let's take a look at our last question, number 17, that I have highlighted. And the question says, how does our bipartisan political system impact the decisions of Congress? Well, of course, bipartisan means how many parties? That's right, two. And those two are Democrat and Republican parties. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't third parties. However, in a two-party system, it means that Democrats and Republicans dominate those high political offices. Now, because they have differing platforms, the majority parties of Congress may be different. Like currently we have Republicans that are leading the Senate and Democrats for the majority in the House. Now, of course, they're both going to try to push bills through. Remember the push and whip? I know you've been doing that at home. It's okay, I have to. They're going to push bills through that support their particular platform. Now, this can cause gridlock. Now, what gridlock means is where you have a very major conflict in Congress, that one side doesn't want to support the other side's bills and laws that they're trying to push through, of course, because they have different agendas to support their constituency or the people that they are representing. And so they're trying to support their constituency. However, sometimes that conflict can be good in order to check and balance the powers of the political parties. George Washington himself had said that we have to be very careful about developing political parties. He didn't want that to happen because he felt like it would be too divisive for our government. But on the flip side, sometimes again, that conflict is a good way to check and balance the will of the majority. And so in our representative democracy, being a republic, the republic itself means that, yeah, majority rules, but minorities still maintain their rights, and that's incredibly important in our country. So that brings us to the conclusion of our video, quick review of political parties. However, if you have any questions about this assignment when you're meeting with me for office hours, please let me know. Bring those. That's what really the office hours is for, is questions and concerns. You can definitely email me, especially if you're having some difficulty closer towards the end of the week, because remember, this assignment is due in Canvas by Sunday, April the 5th by 11:59 p.m. I hope to see you guys soon. I miss you.